Hello, this is Cliff Godwin. I manage eBusiness Suite development at Oracle, and I'd like to give you an update on our strategy and roadmap. So I'm going to talk about initially our overall strategy and the cadence we have for delivering you new functionality and new releases, and then talk about some support timelines. And then I'll spend most of the time talking about what we've done recently in eBusiness Suite, just to give you an idea of the ongoing investment in the product line. I'll cover some additional resources that can help you get the information you need to make your plan to progress with eBusiness Suite, and then some final thoughts to wrap up. So let's start with the overall strategy. Our strategy we call continuous innovation, which means that we're going to be able to update new capabilities, new features in eBusiness Suite, and update the technology underneath eBusiness Suite as two separate trains of activity. So traditionally, you've known eBusiness Suite to have major upgrades periodically, and in more recent years, we focused on updating a specific release product line on an ongoing basis. So that's what we call continuous innovation. So what that looks like is that since 2013, we've been providing annual updates quite reliably to the 12.2 code line of eBusiness Suite. And in parallel with that, we've been providing twice a year updates to enterprise command centers. Now, the important thing to understand is that the very latest version of enterprise command centers can be used with any of these versions of eBusiness Suite that you would be on, basically 12.2.4 or higher. So you don't really have to move up to the latest 12.2.13 at this point code line that we have in order to use the very latest enterprise command center delivery that we have. You can take that most recent April 2024 update and apply it, let's say, to 12.2.9 without updating your 12.2.9 system. So as I mentioned, the way that we have traditionally updated eBusiness Suite has been to change the technology and the applications at the same time in what we would call a major upgrade or a major release upgrade, say going from 12.1 to 12.2. You would go to change the middleware and you change to a known release level of the applications and reapply customizations and all of that work all at the same time in one project. Going forward, we're not doing it that way. We're going to give you an ability to take the current version that you're running of eBusiness Suite and update the technology underneath it and give you back the same version that you had of the applications, just rebuilt with the later underlying technology dependencies. So that process will allow you to separate the updating of the technology stack from the ongoing updates to the Business Suite code level that you have. So that's why we don't have to do any more major upgrades of eBusiness Suite. That's why there won't be a 12.3 or a 13 of eBusiness Suite, because we'll indefinitely go on with the 12.2 updates, and will in parallel give you the ability to update the technology underneath eBusiness Suite to stay current. Now, we traditionally would have had a certain amount of support timeline associated with a release, but because the 12.2 release essentially goes on and on, that concept doesn't apply. So we really rethought how to frame the support commitment to to eBusiness Suite, because the eBusiness Suite 12.2 really is the release which will have the support commitment that reflects eBusiness Suite as a whole. So when we first announced this strategy, we announced that we would commit to support through 2030, which is more than 10 years away. And then the next year we updated that to 2031. And then each year recently until all the way through this current year, we've continued to update it. And most recently in 2024, in about April, we updated this to 2035. So the way to think about the Premier support commitment on eBusiness Suite is not that 2035 is a real support date which you should plan around eBusiness Suite ending. That's not really correct. It's that we're making sure that there is always a 10-year support window or commitment of Premier support in the future. And the reason we picked 10 years is because that's realistically beyond anybody's planning horizon. So you can expect it that to continue to be updated. If we ever were to decide to end Premier support of eBusiness Suite, you can be confident you would have at least a 10-year notice of the date when that would happen. So you could plan to do something else sometime during that 10-year period, but that's not really the situation currently. So the really the thing to take away from the support discussion is that with this 10-year rolling commitment, you really don't have to worry about the support life of eBusiness Suite. Now, that raises the question, though, is the support the same on all of the earlier update levels of the 12.2 release? And periodically, we will update what we call the error correction baseline policy, which means this is the release, the patch level, essentially, or the update level of eBusiness Suite, where we test new, basically bug fixes, and where we will do new technology certifications. So as of July 1st of 2024, it's already passed, we have updated that to be 12.2.7. That means that an issue reported today, we will test with the current code that we have. We'll also test it with 12.2.7 so that anything between 12.2.7 and the current level will be validated to work with that correction. If you're on a release below that, we will not have tested that new fix against that earlier release level. So what does that really mean? It means if you're on 12.2.7 or higher for the products that you're running, you're fine, we will be testing for the release you're running. If you're still running 12.2.5 or 12.2.6, for example, of eBusiness Suite, you're still supported. You can still contact support, report your issue. We'll still give fully tested security updates for your release, the critical patch updates that come out quarterly. If you report an issue, we will attempt to fix it. But if there's an available fix for that issue, that we can determine whether that fix was made before we change the baseline, in which case it would have been tested with your release, or support can determine that it wasn't, in which case development may have to become engaged and do a backport essentially of that fix to validate how to deliver it to the system that you're on. So you're still supported, but there will be additional interaction with support and possibly development to get fixes on your system, more than there would be if you were on 12.2.7 or higher. And the reason that we've done this is that we're trying to make patching simpler for people who are staying relatively current. So the vast majority of customers who are on 12.2.7 or higher can get, in many cases, simpler patches or patches that are tested at levels closer to the code line they're running, and have an easier patching experience. So it benefits the vast majority of customers while creating a little bit of extra work for the people who are farthest behind. So if you are on one of those earlier releases, it's not an emergency, but you should not plan to stay on that release, the 12.2.5 or 12.2.6, without updating for a long period of time, and should plan a project to get to the current release level. The other key point is that new technical certifications will be done at 12.2.7 and higher. So if you're on 12.2.6, for example, we will not certify the Oracle 23 AI database with that version. And we also, when we do that technology stack update that I explained earlier, we haven't delivered that yet, but when we do deliver that, that will be for 12.2.7 or higher. In fact, you'll have to have applied the 12.2.7 suite level release update across the board in order to do that project. So again, if you are at 12.2.5 or 12.2.6, you should make a plan to apply the current EBS release update. It's 12.2.13 at the time of this recording. It could be 12.2.14 by the time you're hearing this. So look up the current release update and apply that on your system to get current, and then you'll be in a position to take the 23 AI database and do the technology stack update. Now that's about the 12.2 release in general, and that goes on again with the 10-year rolling support window. If you're on the 12.1 release of eBusiness Suite, that Premier support on that expired at the end of 2021, so we're actually years beyond the point where that was supported with full Premier support. We have an offering in place called market-driven support, which comes at an extra cost. We have committed to have that through 2025. We've not made a commitment to have it beyond that. So given the timelines, if you're on the 12.1 release, you need to make a plan to upgrade your eBusiness Suite version pretty urgently. I mean, if you have another project in place to completely move off of eBusiness Suite by the end of 2025, either by moving to the SaaS product lines or doing something else, you can obviously finish that. But if you are on the 12.1 release and you don't currently have a project to move forward, At this point, you simply need to plan a technical upgrade of your 12.2 of your 12.1 environment to EBS 12.2, just so you remain in a good support situation. So I think we've covered this. So let's talk about what is new, some new functionality we've delivered, and I'll focus here on functionality we've delivered in late 2023 and early 2024. You can always look at the new features presentations we do whenever we come out with a new release for details on some of the things that we talked about, or for a more inclusive presentation on that. But I'll just highlight a few things in here just to indicate the types of investments we're still making, and just so you're aware of some of the key things that we've done. So we always group our investments in eBusiness Suite into three categories: the user experience improvements, the features and functions we build for your business, and the ways in which we leverage underlying technology. So I'll approach the discussion here in that way. So first, to introduce the key concept we have to improve the user interface. It's really this functionality I referred to earlier called Enterprise Command Centers. And the idea behind Enterprise Command Centers is that we are replacing the home pages of the applications with BI dashboards that let you look at key indicators, follow charts and graphs, or introduce filter criteria to find your way as an end user, not a business analyst, but an end user, to the transactions that are important for you to work on, given your role in the organization. So things transactions you might have found by consulting an invoice aging report, or a late shipments report, or an orders on hold report, or a manufacturing component shortages report. Things you might have identified through custom reporting, you can identify through this interface and then move directly to the transactions that are required to resolve the issue. So it's a productivity improvement for end users, and it should reduce the burden on the IT department of maintaining custom reporting. Now, this, as I mentioned, works essentially with all the releases of the 12.2 of eBusiness Suite. This is not something you have to buy. You're basically entitled to use it for the products you've licensed with the eBusiness Suite. It honors the EBS security policies automatically, so a user can only see in these interfaces the data that they would be able to transact on, or that they should be able to see in the system, given their security profile. And this is extensible, so you can change these dashboards or make your own with a very nice development framework called the ECC framework. We have this now in front of essentially all the applications. So if you identify areas where you think this would be beneficial, you should probably assume that there's some good ECC functionality you could take advantage of. Now, in addition to just in terms of how we make our investments, in addition to that user interface type of investment headlined by the Enterprise Command Centers, we also are continuing to add enhancements that customers are asking for. That's the other big driver of what we do in eBusiness Suite, is the ideas that customers have that attract actually a lot of customers in agreeing that that's an important suggestion. So if you look at our support communities, which we have on MyOracle Support, there your users introduce ideas and vote on each other's ideas, and that, together with the support system where certain bugs that are logged turned into, or service requests turn into enhancement requests, if you bring all that together, we have an enormous number of suggestions. But with the voting, only about 1% of those ideas actually attract votes from 20 different organizations. So it's actually a very good process for us to essentially find a limited set of things which a large number of customers really want. And the track record we have is we've delivered now over 36% of those high scoring ideas. We've delivered over 800 ideas that are motivated by this process in the product. So that is a way where you can be heard, and we can influence our product direction by participating in those support communities. So now I'm going to turn in each area to just a couple of highlights of something we've done, just so you can get a sense of the type of investment that we're making. I'll start with financials. And here I'm going to highlight, again, the Enterprise Command Centers. The General Ledger Command Center is one that essentially would be applicable to almost every customer of eBusiness Suite. Most every customer uses General Ledger. And the enhancements we've made most recently in that area are to support secondary or reporting currency ledgers, and also the ability to not only do accounting segment drill down, but actually include the cost center hierarchy in your drill down. So I'm going to show you a use case of that. So imagine that you're an airline headquartered in the United States, but you have what we call outstations. You have installations or entities that operate everywhere where you fly, because every place you fly, you have employees, you have some ground equipment, you have some, you're buying parts that might go into the airplanes, whatever you're doing in that location that you fly to. You need a legal entity there, you need to do accounting there. So you typically would have a big portfolio of subledgers for those countries where you fly to. So let's look at how you might do some financial analysis when you're trying to close a period, let's say a month period ending in February, and you're looking at expenses to see if anything looks unusual. So let's start with, we're on the February period, but let's compare it to January to see if anything looks like it's changed very much from January. So you could just introduce January as an additional period. And now you've got a comparison. So you can easily visualize that a couple of categories of expenses here have changed materially since the prior month, but one of them is very high. So this is the maintenance supplies. So let's click on that and see what's happening. So you click on maintenance supplies, and now the whole interface repaints just with filtered by maintenance expenses or maintenance supply expenses. And so we can see down in the data in the table that the one area where you had a big increase in maintenance supplies is driven by the outstation you have in the UK. So that went up to 21,000 in this period. So that's the thing to be concerned about. So what we want to do is switch our focus to the UK subledger. So this is the subsidiary ledger that we maintain for the UK legal entity. So you can switch to that subledger. Now we're in the context of that subledger, and you notice the actual amounts changed because now we're dealing with British pounds rather than US dollars. So we see this maintenance supply number, but we want to get down to understand what's behind it. So now we can drill down by the cost center hierarchy to see all the cost centers that are rolled up into maintenance supplies as an account. So when you do that, you can see several cost centers. There's hangar maintenance, which is the associated with your ground operations. There's also aircraft maintenance and other kind of component maintenance, other equipment pieces that you might be maintaining. And so it looks like our problem, if you just look at the numbers, is in this hangar maintenance category. So something about maintaining things on the ground in the UK is the source of this maintenance supply issue. So now let's drill down to see what's happening with this account more broadly. So you can see all of the, with a hierarchical representation now, you can see all of the maintenance supplies broken out, maintenance supply expenses broken out by the journal entries and even the journal entry lines that went into that balance. So again, you can see here the particular journal entry line that is relevant. So when you drill down from here, you drill down to the subledger journal, here you see the 11,000 is broken out into two debits, one for uh, uh, well, there are two debits here that you'll need to investigate. So let's view what the underlying transaction is for the biggest part of that. So what that is now we're into payables. We've drilled back into the payables subledger where this was originally captured. And what the description is that there is an amount for replacement of a compressor in an air conditioning system and some amount for installation services. So as the person trying to make sure the books are valid here before you close the period, your concern is whether or not this should be capitalized or whether this is properly an expense. So you contact the payables manager in that location in the UK, or potentially somebody in the maintenance area there, to understand whether or not that 10,000 pound item that you bought is the same as really just a repair. Is it replace an identical unit that you had, or is it a better unit than the one that you had, in which case it should be capitalized? So once you validate that, you can make sure that this accounting treatment is correct. If you are actually the user who needed to make this change, or the payables manager who needs to make this change, if you needed to change it to be treated as an asset, you could just essentially use the same screen and tick the box there that says to treat this as an asset, in which case it'll be moved over to fixed assets and depreciated. So this is an example of several important things. One is that you are drilling across currencies and across ledgers. You use the cost center hierarchy to isolate the problem. You drilled all the way back into the subledgers to understand this in detail, and then you actually are in a position to transact on it if you're the right person to do that. So that is the, kind of the nice seamless flow across sort of analytics and transaction system capabilities. The other thing to understand is a lot of people look at this functionality and say, oh, well, I already have reporting. I don't need a different reporting tool. But actually what we're looking at here is information that probably isn't already moved into a warehouse or some other reporting environment, because this period has not been closed yet. This is not financial data that you would move into your warehouse. This is a trial balance where you're trying to understand an unexpected amount because you're the person verifying whether the data is correct at all. So you may not have corporate reporting that addresses this part of the process or this level of the problem. And the connection that this has with eBusiness Suite is so tight that it would be essentially, very, very difficult for you to accomplish the same level of integration with a different tool that didn't know all about EBS security and wasn't in the context of EBS sessions. So the next demo I would like to give is around cash management. So this is another financial transaction. In this case, it's very kind of operational. This is something that you as an end user would be doing routinely in the system. If your job is to reconcile bank statements, and we can all relate to reconciling a bank statement, that process currently without this in eBusiness Suite is fairly cumbersome. You use an Oracle Forms-based interface to address this problem. So let me show you what it's like when you deploy enterprise command centers. So first you pick a bank account that you want to work with. And so now we see a list of unreconciled statement lines and available transactions. Now, the initial reconciliation of bank statement lines and accounting transaction is done automatically. So things that match perfectly are matched, and you don't have to worry about them as a manual process. But there are going to be some cases where either the dates don't match, or maybe there's one bank statement line that matched two different accounting transactions, or two bank statement lines for one accounting transaction. Those kind of things happen, and that's what requires manual reconciliation. So here we are with a large amount in a particular bank statement line, 522,000, that needs to be manually reconciled. So for a number that big, you probably want to actually not look at all of the available transactions, many of which are very small. You probably want to filter that. And so what we could do is apply a filter to look at the available transactions only that are above 100,000. So when you do that, you see a much smaller list, and they're sorted by, I mean, you see that a couple of them come to the top here, and you can click on the top two of those that add up to the 522,000. You can click on the one on the left that matches that. And now you've established just by those three check marks that those things are what you want to reconcile. You click a reconcile button, and the system makes a little transaction for you to enter that this is a reconciliation transaction. So when you do that, you submit that, and those transactions you matched are removed from the list of unreconciled ones. And you just proceed to do this and kind of loop through this until they're all resolved. So this is another example of a much more productive experience than you'd have without this in eBusiness Suite, and also about how you can display kind of information to analyze. And once you find out what to do, you can very quickly move to performing a transaction. Again, very different from sort of working in an analytics system and then going over separately to do transactions in a different system. Okay, so let's shift gears. That was financials. Let's talk a little about order management. So I'm going to start with order management with an ECC demo in this area as well, and then we'll talk about more general functionality in this area. So what we've added recently in order management is an enhancement to the order management command center to deal with analyzing credit holds. So to give you context, if orders are not shipping, there's usually one of several reasons for that. Either you have a problem with shipping, like a problem with the freight carriers or something. You may have a inventory problem. Maybe you're out of stock on the thing that they ordered, or because there's an issue with the account, meaning that there's like a credit hold and you're not going to ship any orders because the customer's already got enough credit exposure. You don't want to give them any more. So as a customer service rep trying to expedite orders for the customers you're responsible for, those are the kinds of issues you deal with, and the order management command center helps you with all of those cases. What we've added most recently is to handle that credit hold case. So let's take a look at an example of that. So in this case, let's imagine that you're a customer service rep. You come in the morning and you look at the orders position, the orders dashboard for the customers that you're responsible for. You can see that there's some red there, meaning there's some orders with alerts. So let's go over and look at the alerts. And we can see that most of the alerts come from credit check failure. So let's just focus on the credit check failures. So now we're looking at the specific transactions, the orders that are on hold for credit check failures. Let's see which customers those are for. Okay, there's one customer that makes up the bulk of that amount that's on hold. So let's focus on that customer. So now we're in the context of the one customer with the biggest amount on credit check hold. And now we can see what's going on for that customer. So we're going to look at the credit check hold analysis. And what that tells us is it shows us the big order that's on hold, and it says that this is on hold for two reasons. One is on the left, that the individual order exceeded an order limit that we've established of 10,000, and this order's for 11,000. And also the credit exposure we have for the customer, we set a limit for 30,000, and this order would push it up to 33,000. Now, the reason this is important is the order management system gives you a lot of flexibility to establish a lot of complex criteria for how you want to apply credit limits to customer situations. You could have an order limit, you could have an overall customer limit, you have a customer site limit. There's many aspects that you can set. So the issue that creates is that if you're the customer service rep dealing with the customer, it can be hard for you to figure out which limits were actually being the problem when a customer's order won't ship and it just reflects credit hold. So what we've done to solve that here is surface the specific limits that are being exceeded that are causing something to be on credit hold, and then giving you the credit exposure details so you can understand everything that went into that. so that if a customer is, if you need to interact with the customer, you can talk to them about the various things that are going on that make up their credit exposure. So in this case, we want to just kind of analyze what the pattern of orders is that is part of this. And you can see that the pattern that the customer has is ordering roughly 2,000 from us every week, but suddenly they ordered 11,000. And that's an unusual pattern. And let's suppose this is a restaurant supply business where periodically somebody's ordering consumable supplies, but this is a different type of order that we're seeing here. So what we see when we look down and drill down on that order is you actually see the detail of the order, and you can see what they've ordered. They actually ordered an equipment purchase, like a freezer, because their freezer broke, and so they need to replace that. And that's much more expensive than the normal things they buy. So that's why this is going on. So now that you understand that this is the issue, and that we want to sell these people a freezer, so it's not like something bad is happening. We want to satisfy this in the business. So you would talk to the credit analyst and explain that between the regular pattern of the orders and the invoices we've shipped that they haven't paid, and then this big order, we're going over these limits, but get their agreement that we should go ahead and fulfill this order. And once you get them to agree to that, you can take the action right from here to release this hold. And then you can enter in the description of that the fact that you actually work with the credit analyst to get their agreement. You can include any attachments or supporting information that you need as evidence for why you took the action to release the hold despite the fact it was over the credit limit, and then you can save that information and move on to the next issue. So again, it shows you the interaction between analyzing a problem and taking action on it, and also rounds out the functionality we have in order management around helping to resolve late shipments. Now, in terms of functionality in order management, I want to highlight that over the course of the 12.2 release, we have been progressively supporting recurring revenue streams. So as more and more businesses move to ordering not just products or making service contracts, but actually offering their solutions as a combination of products and associated subscriptions, we have added support early on for just subscription ordering, where you can order a product and associated warranties or replacement supplies or consumables, whatever those things might be. We've added support for other billing methods that are related to that, like recurring billing, where you provide somebody some equipment and you charge them until they give it back, or milestone billing, where you might charge a certain amount on ordering, a certain amount on delivery, and a certain amount after it's successfully configured and operating, or even usage-based billing, where you can establish billing tiers where, like with a mobile phone plan, you get charged a certain amount, and if you go beyond a certain usage tier, you're charged at either a different fixed amount or a different rate, or whatever you want to establish. And we just import usage information and then bill out of the order management system for that. So we've been continuing to do that, and we do that on an ongoing basis. So those of you who might be on earlier eBusiness Suite releases and you're wondering what would be some of the value of moving up to a current release, you should look at this area, because many of you will have these kind of recurring revenue models, and it is more natively supported in order management in case you've customized to achieve that in your current implementation. Now, in addition to the billing methods, I'll highlight a set of capabilities around internal sales orders, because this is an example of functionality that was very highly voted in the IDEAS system. Right. So I mentioned earlier about how we pay a lot of attention to what people are voting for, and this whole area has gotten a lot of votes. So we focused on it. In the last several releases, we've really built out a set of capabilities that make internal sales order handling a lot closer to what you have for external sales orders. So, for example, you've always been able to return an external sales order, but now with 12.2.11, we've been able to, you can now return an internal sales order, and you can cancel an internal sales order. You can cancel individual lines or even partially received lines. So for example, if organization ordered 10 of something from organization B, and only 7 arrived, or 7 arrived and 3 others were damaged, you simply want to cancel you don't want those 3 again. You just say, okay, let's go with the 7 that we have. You can cancel the partially received line for 10. So it's not just that you can record the cancellation, but you can actually deal with in the case of the returns, the documents that are involved in shipping something back. And most importantly, you can deal with the intercompany accounting. You can get, it automatically creates all the reversal entries to undo the accounting that you did when the first transaction occurred, and including all the cost accounting. So it's very sophisticated. Many people have customized in this area, and if you have, you should look at whether you can move to our standard functionality now as of the 12.2.13 level. Switching gears to logistics, some really interesting thing. We have a great command center things to talk about, but what I'm going to highlight here is something even more fundamental. We've supported a manufacturing method called Kanban that many of you would have heard of in the context of like automobile manufacturing. The idea of just-in-time manufacturing, where you replenish components on an assembly line just as they're needed, as opposed to using more primitive planning methods like just reordering when you get to a specific, when the overall inventory gets to a specific level, or even trying to anticipate that level, having a reorder point identified for your overall organization inventory. I mean, this is a much more granular way to deal with replenishment of components that are being consumed. So the point here is that you've always associated that with a manufacturing method, but in talking to a lot of customers, there are other organizations that could benefit from managing inventory this way. So if you are a hospital, for example, and you have inventory at various supply rooms at various points and on all the different floors of your hospital, and you want to replenish the inventory, the items that are being consumed out of that, on a very efficient basis so that you restock them just as they're needed, and maintain less investment in inventory of all of those replenishment supplies, you can use this Kanban method to do it, and you're not a manufacturer. So with the news here is that we rebuilt the Kanban solution that we had with HTML interfaces and enterprise command center functionality. It's a very nice system where you can do all the replenishment planning and establish plans and track exceptions to the plans and deal with situations where a supplier doesn't supply in time. All of that is automated. And the important thing is that what we're doing now is saying you don't have to license manufacturing to be able to use this. So we basically did this rewrite of this functionality and then have positioned it as just inventory functionality. So if you're that hospital that could benefit from this inventory management technique, you can just use it because you use Oracle Inventory. You don't have to worry about the fact that you're not licensed for it because you're not a manufacturer. So it really opened that up to be consumed by a wider set of customers. In a similar vein, we've separated historically the warehouse management application from what we call yard management. So warehouse management handles the operations that are occurring within a warehouse or a distribution center. But outside of that, there are trucks that are arriving and need to be inspected and have their loads unsealed, and they need a dock appointment for when they're going to unload at the warehouse dock. The whole check-in and check-out process. That is an area of functionality we have called yard management, and that's been a separate product. What we've done now is we are folding all of that into warehouse management. So if you're simply a warehouse management customer, you can now use that yard management functionality. We've now delivered that as part of warehouse management at our latest release level. We even have a mobile application to our MSCA applications now handle these cases. So you can now handle the operations outside the warehouse as well as inside the warehouse. So if you run warehouse management, I encourage you to adopt that. Last point I make is on the fact that in general in the supply chain areas, we have added, particularly in logistics, we have added a lot of new APIs, many for transaction data, but also for reference data. People want to maintain the reference data programmatically in many cases, and or synchronize that data from other systems where it's being tracked. So we have built a lot more APIs. The ones that are highlighted in brown here are ones we've added recently, but the point of this is that some of the most common enhancement requests from Git for customers are to provide more APIs, and we've been doing that. Shifting gears now to procurement, there are two things I want to mention here. One is that we've used the ECC technology to build not just an analytic type dashboard or a homepage, but also a shopping experience. So if you're using EBS iProcurement to allow your end users to essentially shop for things that your organization is going to buy, we have a very nice user interface that is much more consumer-like than the interface that otherwise would be there. And again, there's no cost to adopt this. You just have to basically turn it on. So I'd certainly encourage anybody to do that. And we continue to invest in making this nicer. And then the other thing I want to bring to your attention is that we have a capability that's, again, free with EBS. It's called Oracle Business Network. You may have known it previously as Oracle Supplier Network. And it is a network that's run by Oracle, where suppliers load their information. They upload their catalogs, they upload their information about how to connect with the supplier, how to get to the punch out site, address and billing information, all these things about the supplier. They're maintaining that information in this central place. And so you can use Oracle Business Network to communicate with those suppliers. What we've done recently is allow you to upload a list of suppliers, and we will match that list with the ones who are known on the business network. And then you can bring down into eBusiness Suite the supplier information, because otherwise either you have to enter that information or you have to get the supplier to connect through iSupplier Portal and type that information into your individual system. So it's obviously a lot more efficient if this is already available in a network for you to just attach to that information and then download that, and then you'll get changes as well. The other capability that's new is suppliers can register their punch out sites. So if there's a very highly specialized shopping or configuration site that you have to punch out for that to shop for that supplier's goods, they can produce a punch out site that applies generally to everybody, but then also specialized ones that may be constructed for particular customers, particular large customers or corporate accounts where they would have custom pricing or custom selection processes that have been negotiated. So there's a registry of punch outs, and then as a buying organization, you can use this to connect to the punch out for that supplier that's appropriate for your buying experience. On the project side, I won't spend a lot of time on this. We have a projects command center that helps you with all the flow of money through the project process, things like you're establishing that your project costing is being done correctly, that your billing is being done correctly, and that if you're like engineering construction, where you might want to make paying the suppliers contingent on receiving the money from the customers for the thing that the supplier did, you can establish those relationships and put things on hold and take them off hold to help manage that kind of pay when paid functional process. Functionally, one of the key things to know about what we've been doing in projects over the course of the 12.2 release is we've been making a whole set of ongoing billing enhancements. And these include things like being able to bill multiple or different organizations within a particular customer. For example, if it's engineering construction, you might bill one group for architectural services and another group for major materials like structural steel, and another group for progress payments on the overall work progress on the project. The inverse of that's also true. If you're doing multiple projects for the same customer and you want to consolidate the invoicing and consolidate the billing, we support that too. So just to be aware, we have a lot of project billing functionality that we've been adding. Switching gears now to manufacturing. Again, we have command centers in both discrete and process, and for outsourcing and for project manufacturing. And I won't go through demos here, but this is very powerful in this area, make a lot of use of this network diagramming capability to do things like identify if you have multiple different assemblies that failed a quality check, you can find an underlying common lot of material that's maybe responsible for that, and then turn around and figure out where else that lot of material was consumed in all of your products, and then go put those on hold, put the orders on hold, or quarantine the inventory, or whatever that's appropriate. So a lot of the sort of root cause analysis, impact analysis, leveraging that genealogy. And beyond that, we have things like dealing with material shortages, component shortages, cases where if you have outsourced manufacturing and one of the raw material orders that you make is late getting to your manufacturing partner, and you need to make another arrangement to get that back on time, how you spot and deal with those issues. So very elaborate functionality around discrete manufacturing, and similar set of very elaborate functionality around process manufacturing. Again, identifying root cause and impact analysis on quality issues. Maybe you have a bad batch or a bad lot of ingredients that was introduced in a particular production batch. You can figure out where all that, the content of that was consumed, or where that was, what orders that might be associated with, so you can quarantine that appropriately. And so forth. And we've also added more recently a lot of functionality around quality inspections and laboratory management functionality, things that are particularly relevant in highly regulated industries like pharmaceuticals and food, but they're applicable also to many organizations that do metals or other process manufactured items. So again, lots of functionality in those areas. In the enterprise asset management lifecycle area, just in the last year, we've made enormous progress. We've replaced an Oracle Forms-based interface that you use for scheduling maintenance technicians and making basically a maintenance work order plan. And then we've added capability in the enterprise command centers for enterprise asset management to identify cases where there's risks to that plan. You may have cases where, because some technician is behind or didn't show up for a shift or something, that you have to do some rescheduling, or you identify that somebody's double booked on something and can't complete it, so some work order is going to fall behind schedule. You can spot those situations, figure out who has available time, and reassign work, all from an enterprise command centers interface. Turning to service, this is an area where we've again done a lot of things in recent years. But the one I would highlight is very interesting, and because we're using machine learning algorithms for this, we're predicting contract renewal risk based on historical data that's within the service system here. So we have data on the service history for different customers, which products you have that are being serviced, that you're servicing for different customers, as well as pricing history and how you price the service contracts. So with all of that history, the system is predicting which contracts in a given period might have a lower likelihood for renewal. So the renewal sales agent, whoever it is that tries to get customers to renew your service contracts, can have that information and know what the high risk renewals are. And those may be cases where they've had a bad service history, or they've had a bad quality experience with the product, or have issues with the service, or maybe your pricing has been high. Whatever it is, you can be aware of those issues so that when you go to get that contract renewed, you can, address those concerns for the customer. In our HCM area, there's a couple things I would highlight. We have rewritten recently all of the mobile applications that we're going forward with, but in particular the HR self-service applications, which include time cards, which are showing here, and the mobile self-service app that has most of the other HR self-service that you would have, like requesting absences or looking up people in the team and looking at your pay slip, all of those things. All of that has been rewritten into a different technology because the prior mobile application framework technology is obsolete. So So this is all available now in a new modern interface, as is the approvals functionality, which you would potentially roll out to all the managers in your organization so they can approve transactions that arise in EBS from a mobile app. In addition to that, we have a payroll command center, which essentially replaces all of the shift reporting that we have in the payroll system and lets you understand various aspects of the payroll run. Is the current payroll run, how is it different from the last one you did? So you can just do sanity checks to see if the number of differences seems reasonable. You can identify cases where somebody is set up in the system, but there's a problem with their assignment and they're not going to get paid. You do various things about exception processing here, that as well as analyzing things like overtime. So if you run EBS payroll, I'd certainly highly recommend that you look into the payroll command center. So shifting gears to technology, this is really the overall topic about leveraging technologies. There's several aspects to it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is running EBS on our cloud infrastructure. And this is a very important point because at this point, many of our customers have already moved their eBusiness Suite environments to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So let me just first introduce that by saying, like, why would you think of moving from on-premise deployment to cloud infrastructure? And again, this is not re-implementing to the SaaS applications. This is just moving your existing EBS system onto our cloud infrastructure. So catalysts that might make you interested in doing that include things like the need for a hardware refresh, where your hardware is coming to the end of its warranty life, or maybe you maybe you've outgrown the size of hardware because you've grown and you now need more hardware. Maybe you're running to the end of a contract with a service provider for data centers or managed service providers, and you want to make a new decision. Lots of things like that could cause you to be open to moving an on-prem solution or a manufacturer or a service provider-based solution to our cloud infrastructure. Financially, what that means is that an EBS on-prem system where you're paying EBS support, you're paying middleware support, you're paying support for the hardware that you're running the middleware on, you're paying database support, you're paying support for the hardware you're running the database on, you're paying some kind of data center cost to run that in some situation in a data center, and you may have multiple vendors associated with that whole set of arrangements. And when you move to OCI, financially, what happens is all of that stuff, except for the EBS support subscription, turns into a single subscription, an OCI subscription with kind of a common OCI currency. And that is charged on a metered basis. So you basically pay for what you use. So as opposed to having to size an on-prem environment for the highest peak load you're ever going to have, like in the middle of an upgrade project or some kind of project where you have multiple environments you have to establish, and you have to pay all the licensing to be able to operate in all those environments. When you move to the OCI environment, you're paying for what you use. You can scale up when you need to scale up, and you can scale it back down. Now, technically what we're providing in that environment, just besides the financial benefit of it, is we're providing automation, because in a completely fully specified environment like OCI, where we know how everything works, we can do a better job of automating how to set up eBusiness Suite, how to move your eBusiness Suite to that environment. And once you're in that environment, how to do lifecycle management activities like cloning and backup and restore and adding a node, or like basically elasticity, adding a node to the cluster, setting up disaster recovery, all those kind of things we can more completely automate than we could when we don't know what your underlying on-premise system is. So we make that automation available through an interface we call Cloud Manager, and this is a list here of features we've added fairly recently to this, but the idea is that you have a list of eBusiness Suite environments, and you can just sort of right click and be able to clone or create a backup of that environment or do various other operations. So it takes something what you're probably maintaining today on premise through bunch of custom scripts that you maintain, turns that into a, nicely automated, nicely presented interface. Now we have, as I mentioned, we have many, many customers who've already done this, and I'll just highlight the fact that we have a number of customers who have documented that they have saved material amounts of money by moving their EBS environments to OCI. We have customers who have documented that they have gotten big performance gains by moving their EBS onto OCI. Certainly, if you're not running Exadata already on premise, you can you simply move to OCI and use the Exadata cloud service or to get a big performance increase for sure over what you're doing on premise. And the third key point is that this is not that big a project to do. We have many customers who have done this in a small number of months from starting to actually having the system up and running. One good example, Michelin, which is like world's leading tire manufacturer, they have 3 production instances of EBS, and in well under a year from the time that they made a commitment to do this to the time that all 3 instances were migrated, they got that project done very quickly. They not only got a big performance improvement, but the performance improvement actually took a number of their business operations effectiveness metrics around how fast they're getting operations done associated with their period close from a marginal category where they're kind of barely getting done, or in some cases incurring delays, to where once they got to OCI, like everything turned green on their dashboard. So I just highlight this because this is a example of a customer that did get cost savings, did get performance improvements, and did the project in a very short, manageable period of time for something as complex as what they're doing. I'll turn to some other technologies now. We have certified eBusiness Suite with the autonomous database in dedicated mode. We're still working with our initial customers on that. So if you're interested in that, you should contact us. And on the slide here is an email address you can send an inquiry to, and we'll reach out to you and talk about the applicability of that for your system. We have found many customers are using the Apex tool that comes with the Oracle database to do extensions and customizations. In fact, so many are doing that we had previously documented how you could build an Apex application and kind of connect it to eBusiness Suite. What we're doing going forward, though, is actually supporting a tighter integration between the Apex or Application Express custom screens that you build and the eBusiness Suite. In particular, we're going to support the idea that you could embed your own custom Apex page inside an OA framework overall page. So that will just help the users find the navigation and the integration, the kind of consistent look and feel experience between the standard screens that we ship in HTML and your custom screens, because you'll be able to embed that custom screen in essentially a container within one of our standard pages. So we provide a template page, in effect, a template container page that you can use to put your Apex into it, and it will share the sign-on. It will share the same EBS sessions. It'll have all the same security context that the standard pages have. And then now it's going to be, from a UI perspective, kind of embedded in that. So it's just a ways to help your custom Apex built capabilities seem more natural and native and cleanly integrated than they would previously. So this is something, as of the time I'm recording this, we don't quite have out yet, but we expect to have this well before the end of 2024. Another integration we've been working on, again, not quite out yet, but that we're working on it, is with Oracle Guided Learning, which is a user assistance technology now that's very nice. You'll be able to build your own content. We aren't going to be providing content, but if you want to build instructions that your own users using certain applications need to know for guidance or procedures, they can populate the guided learning tool with that content, and then we'll pass the context so that when they're asking for help in a certain context, they get just the right instructions back that you provided for people trying to do that activity. Last thing I'm going to close with is actually a remarkable capability. I kind of saved this for last because, of course, generative AI is all the buzz. And but I want to show you something that is remarkable as an EBS user. So let's suppose you had a set of just questions that you had that could be answered by EBS data. Which suppliers have payments on hold? What was the scrap on recent work orders and so forth? How, who are the people in my organization in a particular category who took absences last month? Things, just ad hoc questions you might have. What again, we haven't delivered this as of this recording, but what we're working on doing soon is allowing you to use a generative AI capability to get answers to that directly from eBusiness Suite. So what you'll have, we're going to essentially show you how to create a custom Apex page where you can type in a prompt, like show the work order with the most total scrap quantity. And the system, using AI technology that I'll explain in a moment, is going to actually create a query that's going to answer that. And then the Apex page will actually dynamically build a report that answers that question. So you just ask that natural language question, and what you'll get back is a report with the answer. What's the work order of the most total scrap? There it is. But what's even better is, now that you have that context with that work order, you can then ask a further question. Are there any quality issues that were reported during the assembly of this work order? And now it's going to look in the quality database and find all the quality nonconformances that were logged associated with this particular work order. But then you may have a further question. Well, are there any of these issues due to a faulty component? So then it'll actually go back into those nonconformances and find the faulty component. Doesn't just answer whether they will be, actually shows you dynamically the faulty component. And now you've figured out that for this particular assembly that had the most scrap value, that these components, the component that was responsible for the nonconformances was plate glass. So you found your way to a quality problem just through natural language inquiry, which is really remarkable. So what's going on here? So what's happening is, this is a combination of the eBusiness Suite system, of course, an autonomous database. Now, you don't have to move your eBusiness Suite itself to autonomous database. This is like a separate autonomous database deployment, which is really hosting a bunch of structural information about how eBusiness Suite is defined and set up, and a generative AI large language model, and our Apex tool. So what's happening is that the Apex tool collects your prompt, sends it over to autonomous database. Your prompt is sort of married with information about the structure of eBusiness Suite. That's sent to a large language model. A SQL statement comes back that will answer that question in the context of EBS views that are defined, and then we apply a security that's passed back to eBusiness Suite. We apply a security predicate to that and run that query in the context of the user who asked for it. So the data that you see is secured. The user will only see the data that they should be allowed to see in the system, based on the security policies that are in place. So that is remarkable. And you can use Oracle's large language model, which is Cohere. If you have an entitlement to use other large language models like ChatGPT or something, you could do that also. This is a pluggable concept about how which large language model you send this to. But the key thing is, we're not sending any of your data. No proprietary data is going to the large language model. It's just used for composing the query. And then when we go to actually get the data, it's running in the context of your eBusiness Suite system, which can still be on-prem. But then we make sure that the security policies are enforced. So this is a remarkable capability. Again, we don't quite have this out at the time I'm recording this, but stay tuned for this, because it's a really exciting development, leveraging generative AI to get information from your eBusiness Suite system. So let me close with some additional resources. You can always track what we're doing at oracle.com/EBS. In particular, there's a page, oracle.com/EBS-resources, which has a pointer to a lot of important things like all the product announcements and pointers to all our documentation and training and support materials that you might need. So it's a really good sort of start here point for the substantive resources you're looking for. In particular, I'd call out a few. We have the release content documents. We have a quick start guide for getting started with enterprise command centers. And we have for those of you who are still upgrading to 12.2, we have like a starting point, a resource guide that will help you with the key resources for that project. I highlight the release content documents because this is the answer to the question we often get. Like, I'm on release 12.2.8. How do I figure out what the value of going to 12.2.13 would be? The answer is in each area, we have this document called the release content document. And what it does for that, like for order management in this particular case, it breaks out all the things we added in 12.2.11, 12.2.12, 12.2.13, and so forth. So this is where you would go to get the master list of things that changed between the release you're on and the release you're considering moving to. And then, you can read through that to determine whether that's likely to retire a customization you have, or whether that feature would add value to your business, and build a business case from that. Finally, we have transfer information, which is really implementation level training about how to set up these new things that are described in the release content documents. And all of these, by the way, as you look at the PDF file associated with this presentation, those are live links from that. So you can just get the PDF that's associated with this presentation and click on the links in it, and it'll take you to the right places. So let me close with one thought, which is that if you look across, as I look across what I see happening in the EBS customer base, I kind of categorize it into 6 buckets. And all of these are perfectly good ideas, but I just bring this up because it gives you a sort of a framework for thinking about investments to get more value out of the EBS system that you're running. Number 1 is modernize, in the sense of moving to the current EBS versions. If you're on an old EBS version, especially if you're below 12.2.7, you need to get to the current release. Make sure you're on a current database. You should all be on the 19C database at this point. Second is modernizing by moving your infrastructure over to OCI, where you get the benefits of that extra automation we talked about, in the financial simplicity of sort of pay-as-you-go infrastructure. Adopting ECC is the single most obvious and important thing you could do to improve the user interface experience for your end users and to reduce the operational reporting burden on IT. We have lots of new features, many of which were asked for by customers like you, and you can see what we've done and take advantage of that to reduce your customization footprint and just run your business better with better functionality. I still see a lot of customers in doing global rollouts or rolling acquired company businesses onto their core eBusiness Suite instance. There's a huge amount of activity as people move more and more stuff onto EBS. And they also see people complement